I think the general thinking is that we're better people if we're better informed about what goes on. I think I'm a better person for being better informed about what goes on in that institution and others. I've toured Walla Walla, Monroe, Clallam Bay, other ones. So it helps me to understand when they talk about prison industries. You know, what are prison industries? What do they do? It's not, you're not investigating somebody's case. You're just trying to have a general idea of what's happening.
But if you're sitting on the bench to interpret the Constitution and law, how does that tie? How does a tour to a facility like this, how does that, I'm missing the connection here.
It doesn't.
So why go?
I think it's just general background information about it. Many judges do. If you look at the website for the Judicial Conduct Commission, they say that judges are encouraged to go on institutional tours. So I don't anymore because I don't know what the rules are anymore. Because what they did was they acquitted me on the substantive charge, but then they said that I engaged in the appearance of impropriety. Well, what does that mean? It's like saying, a police officer saying, I saw you go through that intersection. I know you didn't run that red light, but you know, somebody might have thought you did, so I'm going to give you a ticket. And that's what they did to me. So,
you had a question?
So, quick follow-up question on this. Was the fuss on this really about not that you went to a state institution and met with people who were there, but really about the particular state institution that you went to?
I think
that it was the institution that was full of sex offenders?
I think it was an institution that was under a contempt order from federal district court for not properly discharging their treatment program. That made the Attorney General very sensitive about it. They were trying to discourage state court judges from visiting this institution. As far as I know, I'm the only state court judge that ever did. Federal District Court Judge Dwyer went out there several times to enforce his contempt order. So I think they were sensitive about it, and they resented the fact that I would go out and take a tour of this institution that they wanted to keep a big black hole secret about.
May I respond to your question
Yeah.
as well? There's nothing wrong with judges going and visiting a penal institution, certainly. I did that when I was on the Court of Appeals. We went to Shelton. But what we did not do is we didn't sit down and interview inmates seriatim, which is what Justice Sanders did. That's the finding of the Judicial Conduct Commission. I didn't have an opinion in circulation at the time that dealt with issues that were discussed during the visit. I didn't accept a packet of information from one of the inmates and take it home, or take it back to the office, which is prohibited under the prison regulations. So I don't think it had to do with the fact that it was McNeil Island. I think it had to do with the fact that these were interviews, and they were interviews that overlapped with issues that were pending before the court.
Well, what were these interviews? I mean, I didn't try to have interviews with anybody. There were a bunch of prisoners that said, hey, we'd like to say our piece to Justice Sanders and the other people on the tour. So the superintendent said, well, look, there's a room. We'll take you in 3 or 4 at a time. They were all admonished not to talk about their individual cases. None of them did. And then they talked about their experience in the institution. You know, they said the food was lousy. The recreational opportunities were not up to par. The program wasn't teaching them anything. Some of them didn't want to participate because they thought it was a squirrel cage. The piece of paper, you know, I don't know what the prison rules and regulations are. Somebody's got to tell me. It was a butcher piece of paper. The guy just shoved it in my hand. You know, prisoners can mail me things if they want, but this paper just you know, outlined gripes that you would expect to hear from prisoners, that the program doesn't work, the food's lousy, the staff isn't attentive enough to our needs, you know, this kind of thing. So it's a matter of public record. And one other thing, Charlie mentioned this other case, the Yusufian case. You know, I have an excellent record on public disclosure cases. In this material I'll give you, there's a list of every case I've sat on involving the Public Disclosure Act over the last 15 years. And the legislature said it should be broadly construed to promote transparent government, public disclosure. And I've done that in all those cases. I did it in the Yusufian case. I have another little piece of paper that I've generated here, which is sort of a rebuttal to all these allegations that Charlie's making, get into more detail than I can right now, and I would commend that to your attention. When he says my lawyers cited this Yusufian case to the Court of Appeals, so the Court of Appeals ordered the lawyers on both sides to submit a brief on how, if any, the Yusufian case affected the pending case. My lawyer said it was good news. The other side lawyer said it didn't matter at all. In my view, it really had little to do with my pending case. And I was advised by the ethics advisor of the Supreme Court, and I took a tour before I sat on the case. I was advised that there was no need to recuse. And if there's no need to recuse, there's an ethical duty to sit. So I ethically discharged my obligation on that case and every other case.
Well, can I weigh in for just a moment?
Sure.
If I've said I have integrity in any of my materials, it's because I'm talking about myself. But I don't think that Justice Sanders is an unethical person. I don't. I do think he's a very passionate person about his viewpoint, and that sometimes takes him to places where it may look like he's not being fair-minded. And my own conclusion is that, well, as you say, he tries to say that we would support everything the government does. My conclusion is it's not that the government is always right. It's not that they're always wrong either. Sometimes they're wrong and sometimes they aren't. And I do think that one needs to be impartial with respect to those matters. And I do think that he has gone the extra mile because of his passion about his political viewpoint to reflect that viewpoint in his opinions. And that's where I part company with him.
Would you have made that trip?
If I had made the trip, I don't see anything wrong in and of itself visiting those institutions. One of the problems is the Special Commitment Center, which is at McNeil Island. It is not part of the penitentiary as such, but it is a secure facility. There's no question about that. I would be very careful not to discuss anything directly whatsoever with the inmates. I'd be interested maybe in the general conditions, how the thing operates. I think there's nothing wrong with that much education. One of the things I'm talking about as a Superior Court judge coming to the bench is I understand how it really works. I understand how real people have real problems and how those things really get worked out.
But as a Supreme Court justice, would the two of you have made that trip? As a Supreme Court justice, take off your current hat.
Yeah, as a Supreme Court justice, I don't think I don't think that changes anything. I think it's useful to have as much information about, in general, how the project works. The problem is that judges have a responsibility not to investigate a particular case, and this looked like that's what was going on, and that's the problem. Now, I don't know that it actually was going on, and the decision that was ultimately rendered, as I understand it, determined that it wasn't going on that way, and that's one of the problems. I think it's interesting that Justice Sanders says, "Well, tell me what the rules are." Well, as a trial court judge, this is what I'm trying to say to the Supreme Court. You know, don't give me these muddled messages. Don't give me plurality decisions. We need to have decisions that are clear, concise, and consistent. And I can understand why he was troubled by what happened to him. It probably was ill-advised to go just as far as he did. The trip of itself, I don't see as a problem.
I don't think I would have gone. It's hard to say, but I don't think I would have gone because this was an invitation. This was a response to an invitation from inmates there who wanted to talk to the justices. And, you know, this is a matter of crossing the line between what a Supreme Court judge does and what a trial court judge does. If there is an issue over the conditions or proof of whether the people who are confined at McNeil have volitional control over sexually violent impulses, you don't investigate that by going and talking to them yourself as a Supreme Court judge. If that's going to be an issue, it goes into a trial court, so that everybody gets to put the evidence on the table. There's cross-examination, it's under oath. The problem is if you step into that role as a Supreme Court justice and you do this ex parte visit, that's a problem. And I think it's a matter of judgment. I think it's a matter of very poor judgment, and I think any violation of the rules that, you know, Justice Sanders thinks that he was exonerated because they only found him to have violated 2 of the canons and not the 3rd canon. I just don't agree with that.